He spoke less than anyone around him. Yet his words changed China for 2,000 years. Around 500 BC, in a time when everyone was fighting to be heard, one man did the opposite. He stayed quiet, he listened, he watched. And when he finally spoke, people stopped everything to hear what he had to say. His name was Confucius. And he understood something that most people still don't get, that the power isn't in your words, it's in knowing when to use them. And you can only know that if you listen first. Here's the problem. Everyone talks. Constantly. We talk to fill silence. We talk to prove we're smart. We talk to defend ourselves. We talk to win arguments. We talk to be heard. But almost nobody listens. Not really, we're just waiting for our turn to talk. And because of that, we miss everything. We miss what people actually mean. We miss the real problems. We miss opportunities to understand. We miss the chance to learn. We're so busy broadcasting that we never receive. And then we wonder why we're always misunderstood. Why our relationships don't work. Why people don't respect our opinions. Confucius saw this pattern everywhere. China was in chaos. Different states fighting for power. Everyone had opinions about how to fix things. Philosophers arguing. Politicians debating. Teachers preaching. The noise was overwhelming. And none of it was working. You know why? Because nobody was listening to each other. They were just talking past each other. So Confucius did something radical. He shut up and paid attention. He watched how people behaved. He listened to what they actually said versus what they meant. He studied human nature instead of just theorizing about it. And from all that listening, he learned more than all the talkers combined. He noticed something basic but powerful. That people reveal everything if you just let them talk. Their fears, their desires, their character, their intentions, everything. But most people are too busy talking about themselves to notice what others are showing them. Confucius turned this into a practice. Before he spoke, he listened. Before he gave advice, he understood the situation completely. Before he judged, he gathered all the information. And because of this, when he finally said something, it landed. It was relevant. It was wise. It was exactly what was needed. There's this story about Confucius meeting a young student who kept interrupting with questions. The kid wanted answers immediately. Wanted to show how much he knew. Wanted to debate every point. Confucius just sat there, quiet, letting the student talk himself out. Finally, when the student ran out of words, Confucius asked him one simple question. Do you think you can learn something new if your mouth is always moving? The student went silent. And in that silence, he actually learned something. That listening is how you learn. Talking is just repeating what you already know. This became one of Confucius's core teachings. He said, when you know something, say you know it. When you don't know something, say you don't know it. That's real knowledge. Most people do the opposite. They pretend to know everything. They talk with confidence about things they don't understand. They never admit ignorance. And because of that, they never actually learn anything new. But if you listen first, you expose your ignorance to yourself. You hear things you didn't know. You realize gaps in your understanding. You discover that other people have perspectives you never considered. And that's when real learning happens. Not when you're talking. When you're listening. Confucius also taught about something he called the 5 steps of understanding. And the very first step was listening. Not reading. Not thinking. Listening. Because listening to real people in real situations teaches you things books never can. It teaches you about human nature, about context, about nuance, about the difference between theory and reality. He said that a wise person listens to three things: the words people say, the tone they use, and the things they don't say. Most people only hear the words, but the real message is often in the tone or the silence. That's where the truth hides. And you can only catch that if you're truly paying attention. Think about an argument you had recently. Were you listening to understand? Or were you listening to respond? Be honest. You were probably just waiting for a gap so you could make your point. That's not listening. That's just taking turns talking. And that's why the argument didn't get resolved. Because neither of you actually heard the other person. Confucius would tell you that most conflicts exist because people don't listen. They assume, they interpret based on their own perspective. They react to what they think the other person meant instead of what they actually meant. And then they respond to their own assumption. No wonder nothing gets solved. He had this practice when dealing with disputes. He would listen to one person completely, let them say everything they needed to say. No interruptions, no questions yet, just listening. Then he'd do the same with the other person. And usually, just by letting both people be fully heard, the conflict would start to solve itself. Because most people just want to be understood. Once they feel heard, they become more willing to listen themselves. But here's where it gets deeper. Confucius taught that listening isn't passive, it's active. It's a skill. Most people think they're listening just because they're quiet and the other person is talking. But real listening requires focus. It requires putting aside your own agenda. It requires genuine curiosity about what the other person is experiencing. He said there are 3 levels of listening. The lowest level is listening to respond. You're just waiting to talk. The middle level is listening to understand. You're trying to grasp what they're saying. The highest level is listening to learn. You're genuinely open to changing your mind based on what you hear. Most people never get past the first level. And this is why Confucius was so influential. When he spoke, it was clear he had listened deeply to the world around him. His teachings weren't random theories. They were based on observing real human behavior, understanding real problems, hearing what people actually struggled with. That's why his wisdom lasted. It was grounded in reality, not just philosophy. Now, let's make this practical for you. Because this isn't just ancient wisdom. This is the skill that will change your entire life if you actually use it. Think about your job. The people who advance aren't always the ones who talk the most in meetings. They're often the ones who listen carefully, understand what's really needed, and then speak with precision. They're not trying to be heard. They're trying to understand first. And that makes their words more valuable when they do speak. Think about your relationships. The people you feel closest to aren't the ones who talk at you. They're the ones who actually listen to you, who remember what you said, who ask follow-up questions, who make you feel heard. That's what builds connection. Not talking, listening. Here's a test. In your next conversation, try this. Don't say anything until the other person has completely finished their thought. Don't interrupt. Don't jump in with your story. Don't try to fix their problem immediately. Just listen all the way through. Then pause for 2 seconds before you respond. Just 2 seconds. You'll be shocked by what happens. First, the other person will feel actually heard, maybe for the first time in a long time. Second, you'll understand them better, because you weren't busy thinking about your response. Third, when you do speak, your words will be more thoughtful and more relevant. That's the power of listening first. Confucius also taught about listening to yourself. He said most people never stop talking internally either. Their mind is constantly commenting, judging, worrying, planning. There's no silence inside. And because of that, they don't hear their own intuition. They don't notice their own feelings. They don't understand their own motivations. He practiced internal silence, just like external silence. Taking time to be quiet, to observe his own thoughts without immediately reacting to them, to listen to what his inner self was trying to tell him. This is what people now call mindfulness or meditation. But Confucius was doing it 2,500 years ago because he understood that you can't understand others if you don't understand yourself first. Here's another powerful application. Before you make any big decision, listen. Listen to people who have experience in that area. Listen to different perspectives. Listen to your own doubts and excitement. Listen to what your gut is telling you. Most bad decisions happen because people didn't listen enough before deciding. They just jumped to action based on limited information or emotion. Confucius said that a person who speaks without thinking is like someone who shoots an arrow without aiming. Sure, you might hit something, but probably not what you intended. And you might hit something you didn't want to hit at all. Words are like that. Once they're out, you can't take them back. So you better make sure you aimed first. And aiming means listening and thinking before speaking. Think about social media. It's the opposite of Confucius's teaching. Everyone broadcasts. Nobody listens. Everyone has hot takes. Nobody has patience. Everyone reacts immediately. Nobody reflects first. And what's the result? Constant misunderstanding, constant conflict, constant noise with very little wisdom. If more people followed Confucius's principle, social media would look completely different. People would read fully before commenting. They'd ask questions before assuming. They'd consider other perspectives before arguing. They'd think before posting. But that requires discipline. The discipline to listen first. Here's what Confucius understood that most people don't. Your words only have power if they're rare and well chosen. If you talk constantly about everything, your words lose value. Nobody pays attention anymore because you're just noise. But if you speak less and listen more, when you do speak, people lean in. They know it matters because you don't waste words. This is why leaders who talk less often command more respect, not because they're mysterious, but because their words carry weight. They've listened enough to know what needs to be said. They haven't diluted their message with unnecessary talking. Every word counts. Confucius lived this way. He wasn't quiet because he was shy. He was quiet because he was learning. He was observing. He was understanding. And when he spoke, it was because he had something worth saying. Not just to fill air, not just to hear his own voice, but to actually contribute something valuable. The modern world has forgotten this wisdom. We reward people who talk the most, who post the most, who have the loudest opinion, who can debate the fastest. But that's not wisdom. That's just noise. Real wisdom comes from listening more than you speak. From understanding before you judge, from learning before you teach. So here's the challenge. For one full day, try to listen twice as much as you speak. In every conversation, let the other person talk more. Ask questions instead of making statements. Be genuinely curious instead of trying to be interesting. See what happens. You'll probably feel uncomfortable at first. Because we're trained to fill silence, to always have something to say. But push through that discomfort, and you'll discover what Confucius discovered, that listening is the key to understanding, and understanding is the key to wisdom, and wisdom is what gives your words power when you finally choose to use them. Confucius changed an entire civilization, not by talking louder than everyone else, but by listening deeper. His words lasted because they came from understanding, and that understanding came from silence, from patience, from the discipline to listen first and speak second. The question is, are you willing to do the same? Subscribe if this hit different.